Hallo und herzlich willkommen. Ich bin Paul von iDoc.
Hi and welcome. I'm Paul from iDoc and we just got our iPhone 7. Today we're going to tear it
In
down.
einem Teardown. Insbesondere interessiert uns natürlich,
Of course, we're especially interested to see how Apple used the extra space where the headphone jack used to be, how big the battery is, and what screws are in there. We'll also test whether the iPhone is really somewhat splash resistant or maybe even waterproof. So let's get started. I hope you enjoy the video.
Wir wünschen euch viel Spaß beim Zuschauen.
Okay, let's unpack our shiny new iPhone. Now for a quick test of whether the phone lives up to its IP67 certification. We'll put the phone under water for a bit and then see if we find any traces inside the phone. So now I'm going to put it in the water. First I check whether it's working. The touchscreen works, so I'd say time to drop it in. Looks like everything still works. I think this is about how long a phone usually spends underwater when someone drops it. Let's take it out again. I can even use the phone when my hands are wet. I'd say it's already passed the first test, but now we're going to find out whether it's dry inside. Just like in past generations, we have to remove the two pentalobe screws first. As usual, they're next to the lightning connector. When I look down here, of course I see that the headphone jack is missing. On older models, you could just stick on the suction cup near the home button and lift the screen a little, then stick the pick under it. Unfortunately, just like with the iPhone 6s, that doesn't work, which makes me think the display is glued on again. So now we need a heat gun to heat up the adhesive strip I'm guessing is here on the outer edge so the glue will come undone. Then I try again. Now I can get under the display a little. Now we're inside, and I can go ahead and say it's really glued on. I take a peek under the display to see whether there are any cables in the way. Now I see that cables are routed along the right edge of the phone here. That's pretty unusual, or even totally new. We'll find out more in a second. Looks like the cables are no longer routed along the upper side where the earpiece and front camera were. Okay, so now I'll take a look in the phone to see whether I can find any traces of moisture. I check the places that are most sensitive to moisture, but I have to say I don't see any. That means giving the phone a bath for 5 to 10 seconds didn't do anything to it. I don't think water damage will be a big problem for the iPhone 7. Now we take a closer look at the screws and notice that they're no longer Phillips screws, but rather tri-wing screws. Looks like Apple's trying to make it harder for people to replace their own displays again. You'll need a special screwdriver. That's another obstacle after the pentalobe screws that were here at the port. First, let's disconnect what I'm assuming is the display cable. Then we take off the plate. Now, under the plate, we can see the connection for the battery, and then the connections for the display here, and what I'm pretty sure is the connection for the lightning connector here. First we disconnect the battery. That way, we don't have to worry about short circuits. Now I also have to remove the cover from the camera before I can take off the display. It's fastened with Phillips screws. So let's disconnect all these connectors. Then we set the display aside and continue with the inside of the phone. What do you notice right away? The headphone jack is gone. Apple's done something else with the extra space where that used to be. The TAPTIC engine is next to that, and it's gotten a lot bigger. Unfortunately, that means there was no more room for the battery. If the TAPTIC engine were as small as it was in the iPhone 6s, you could definitely have made the battery even bigger. Then we remove the TAPTIC engine. There are 3 Phillips screws holding it in place, and I notice when I use the screwdriver that it's magnetic. We can also see that it's attached here. That's another change. The TAPTIC engine is connected to the Lightning connector. It wasn't in the iPhone 6s. That made it a little easier to remove. The battery is pretty much the same as ever. It just has to be stuck in place so it can't move around. Once again, there are 2 adhesive strips holding it in place. You can pull them out to the side, and then it's pretty easy to detach the battery. It looks the same as in older models, so there are no big surprises here, except that it's a little more powerful. Next, I remove the speaker. Not much has changed at first glance. The shape of the speaker is about the same. It's screwed in. Let's see if we can remove it after we undo these 4 screws. So now we've removed the speaker. When we look at the Lightning connector, we see that the cables are routed under the logic board here. That means this is probably the connector for the Lightning connector. We can't remove it now because we have to take out the logic board first. That's really a step backward for repairs, especially because the Lightning connector is going to get used a lot more now that there's no audio jack. Next, we remove the iSight camera with the optical image stabilizer. On the whole, you can see that the camera is a little bigger and a little bulkier than in the previous model. One reason for that is the optical image stabilizer. So we're just sort of sticking to the steps from previous teardowns in past years. That means we'll remove the logic board now. First, we have to detach the volume and mute button cables here. Then disconnect them and remove what I'm guessing is the Wi-Fi antenna module here. In the meantime, I'll treat myself to a little compressed air. Now we have to see what else we have to unscrew. Of course, it's important to make sure we don't mix up all these screws. After all, we want to put the phone back together and use it afterwards. Now we've removed the logic board, and just like we thought, the Lightning connector's ribbon cable really does go under the logic board and is connected to the board here. There are 3 more screws here. We remove them, and then we can carefully pull off the Lightning cable. You can clearly see that the audio jack's gone. Instead, we have this nice connector for the TAPTIC engine. Now we'll tackle the earpiece, which is supposedly a speaker. My first impression is that they just called the earpiece a speaker and then somehow used it to cobble together stereo sound, because it hasn't gotten much bigger. So here it is. It feels a little heavier and it's a little bigger. We can't tell whether it will produce rich stereo sound, but we're excited to find out later. Then we move on to the home button. We can see right away that it looks different. I don't want to lift it out too much because I don't want to damage anything. First, we simply take off the LCD's rear panel and see what we can find out about the cabling under it. Now I can get a better look. More tri-wing screws. Looks like we've removed all the screws. I take off the plate, and then we can also see the connector for the home button, which I just disconnected. I push the home button out through the front because you can't pull it out here. Here's the home button. It looks different. There's no more mechanical pressure point because everything's capacitive.
Okay, das war's jetzt mit dem Teardown.
Okay, that was it for the teardown. To sum it up, IP67 is great. Our little underwater test didn't do anything to the phone. We couldn't find any moisture inside it.
Feststellen können. Dann gibt's noch die neuen Tri-Wing-Schrauben.
Then we also have the new tri-wing screws used inside the enclosure. They're pretty annoying because they'll make repairs harder, especially for DIYers who may not have that kind of screwdriver in their
In ihrem
collection.
Repertoire haben. Der zusätzliche Platz, den die fehlende Kopfhörer...
In our opinion, Apple didn't make good use of the extra space inside the device where the headphone jack used to be. They could probably just have put in a bigger battery to boost the phone's performance. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'd love to hear what you think. Repair guides for the iPhone 7 will be available soon.
Folgen in Kürze.